back to my channel Gabbabetic. For today's video, I'm going to be giving you my 5 top tips for dining out with celiac disease and type 1 diabetes. You all really enjoyed my 5 top tips for managing type 1 diabetes and my 5 top tips for managing celiac disease videos. If you haven't seen them, I'll link them in the description down below. So that's why today I'm doing a video that combines both. I'm doing a video of my 5 top tips for eating out or dining out with type 1 diabetes and celiac disease, because these are conditions that actually do really affect you when you're dining out in terms of, is the food gluten-free, carb counting the food, managing your insulin. So that's why I decided to do a video on both today. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, comment down below and subscribe if you're new here to the channel. Thank you all so much for your support. But let's start on top tip number 1. Okay, so top tip number 1 then. If you are type 1 diabetic, you'll know that you need to carbohydrate count your food. This means adding up all of the carbohydrates in the food and matching your insulin against that. For example, every 10 grams of carbohydrates for me is 1 unit of insulin. And this is really difficult, particularly when you're dining out. If you're given a plate of food in front of you, how are you really supposed to know the carbohydrate content, the fat content, the protein content? You just have to make your best guess, which is often what I've done in the past. But my tip for today is to, if you can, go online and check the nutritional information if it's available. A lot more restaurants these days, in particular chain restaurants, will have that information online. For example, Nando's. I'll put a few screenshots here and you can see that if you go online and you search the sides or the mains, it will give you the breakdown of the nutritional information of the food. You could see here that for like this mash, this is how much carbohydrates it has, which is incredibly useful for me because then I can know how much insulin to take, and then I'm not taking too little insulin and having high blood sugar, or taking too much and having a low blood sugar. It really stops all of that. So my top tip is that if you can, go online or even contact the restaurant if you have enough time in advance and check out the nutritional information. A lot of the times, like I said, the chain restaurants do have the information on there, so you can get your total carbohydrate portion and then you can be ready when you go to the restaurant and know exactly how much insulin you're going to take. Tip number 2 then is another way to be prepared. If you are celiac, you cannot just assume that the restaurant is going to have gluten-free, even though it's 2022 and that should be a possibility. Oftentimes restaurants do not, and I touched on this a bit in my managing celiac disease video. Be prepared, go online or ring them up and check what the gluten-free options are. Most of the times they will have something, but you don't want to show up to a restaurant that you're looking forward to and find that they have nothing gluten-free first of all, or that the only gluten-free options are something that you actually don't like. That will just take the enjoyment out of it. So definitely be prepared and look online, ring ahead in advance. And one really important tip is, if you are celiac, you know that you can't cross-contaminate. You can't have food that's cooked in the same fryer as food with gluten in it. The restaurant needs to be able to provide you gluten-free food if it's fried in its own separate fryer that has only gluten-free food and has no contamination. So even if a restaurant says, for example, fish and chips, you need to know that those fish and chips are cooked in a separate fryer, because if they're cooked in a fryer with gluten, then there's no point in eating them because you might get really unwell afterwards. So that is a big tip, is to check that there's gluten-free options. Check that they are aware of cross-contamination and can cook your food in a gluten-free environment and it be safe to you. A really great resource is in the UK, if you go on Celiac UK, and I'm sure this is the same for other celiac societies, you can look at the restaurants that are Celiac Society accredited. That means that they've kind of passed inspection, they are cooked in a gluten-free environment, the food's gluten-free, and you can just feel safe going to those places. So I would recommend checking that out. But definitely top tip number 2 then is to be prepared, ring ahead or look online, check that there's food that you can have and that you like that's gluten-free. Check that there is a gluten-free environment for the food in terms of the frying of the food, the cooking, the chopping of the food, that everything is gluten-free. And check out the Celiac Society's list of restaurants, because there's some good stuff on there too. My top tip number 3 then is to always, I can't stress this enough, bring your hypo treatment with you. As you know, if you watch my videos, Lucozade is my hypo treatment of choice for when I have a low blood sugar, and you do not want to be without your hypo treatment. You might think, oh, I'm going out for food, it's most likely that my blood sugar will rise. But like I said, if you don't know the carb counts for definite, and you don't know like the fat portion of the food or the protein content of the food, you don't really know if your blood sugar is going to go up or go down. So I have been caught out in the situations where having a meal, took too much insulin, start to hypo, and then I'm like, oh my god, I don't have anything, need to run out to the shop or else ask for some sugar-filled drink in the place, and it just takes the enjoyment out of it and causes a panic. So definitely bring your hypo treatment with you when you're dining out. If you don't want to bring a big bottle of Lucozade, bring a little glucose tablets. They're easy to put in your pocket, and no one is going to say anything to you in a restaurant if you need to take it out. If someone did say anything to you, just explain to them that you're type 1 diabetic and you have your own medical treatment here. That's what these are classed as. They're not like you're just bringing in a sugary drink into the restaurant, and no one will say anything to you. I've often had Lucozade when I'm in a cafe or something for lunch and I've needed it, and no one has ever said anything to me. So definitely have your hypo treatment with you just in case. Tip number 4 then is all about your insulin. First of all, definitely bring your insulin. Make sure you have it before you go out. And also make sure you have a container to put your needles in. What I do is I use this case and I put any used needles in this part while I'm out, and then I'll just empty it like this into a sharps box when I'm back home. In that way I'm making sure I have all the needles together for when I come home. And I really encourage you, if you are on MDI, multiple daily injections like me, to take your insulin there and then in the restaurant or the cafe. Take it at the table. Don't feel like you need to leave or you need to go to the bathroom. Like honestly, I'd be taking my insulin at the table, literally standing up over there, outside on the bus, on the train. Literally, I don't care if someone is looking at me. That's their issue, not mine. So obviously, if you don't feel comfortable, do whatever you want. Take the insulin, you know, wherever you want. But my advice is, like, this is something that you have for the rest of your life, and you shouldn't feel bad about it. So don't ever feel embarrassed or ashamed taking your insulin. Feel free to just take it there and then in the restaurant. No one has ever said anything to me, ever. A few people might have like looked at me like, what is she doing over there, that kind of thing, but it doesn't bother me. I just inject, give it the 10 seconds and then put it away, and then they look away. Like, no, especially if you look at them, if they're looking at you and you look at them, oh, they look away pretty quick, let me tell you that. But don't be afraid to inject your insulin if you feel like it there and then at the table. And the last thing in terms of insulin, I would recommend, if you're having a meal with a very high fat content, carbohydrate content, to do a fat bolus split. I'm not going to go into detail about that in this video. I have made a whole video on this and I'll link it in the description down below if you want to watch that. But a fat bolus split essentially is for food that are high fat, high carb, where if you injected the whole amount for the carbohydrate, you would probably have a hypo. That's why it's important in point 3 that you have your hypo treatment with you. But by doing a fat bolus split and splitting your insulin over different amounts over like 2 or 3 hours, you can kind of get rid of that hypo, and then it ensures that it covers the fat breakdown later on. It's all in that video though, so I would encourage you to watch that if you want to know more about it. But yeah, my advice in terms of insulin is that if you're having that high fat, high carb meal, to do a fat bolus split, definitely. And I think it would really help you control, you know, your blood sugar, especially having a large meal with multiple courses. My final rule number 5, if you have ordered gluten-free food and you have, you know, checked that it's gluten-free, made sure that the waiter or waitress has written down gluten-free on your order, when it comes out and arrives to you in front of the table, double check again, triple check that it's gluten-free, because you will be very surprised in how many situations that lots of people, including myself, have been in, where you've checked the food's gluten-free, you've made sure that they've written it down for the order to the kitchen, and the food comes out and it's not gluten-free. So always double check before, when they bring out the food, they put it in front of you, ask, is that the gluten-free one? Lots of the times it's really helpful when they say, you know, here's the gluten-free burger, here's the gluten-free roast dinner. Sometimes they might just put it in front of you, so just make sure and say, is this gluten-free? A situation in the past I've been in was actually somewhere in where I live, and there was a gluten-free hot dog on the menu with chips. I was like, oh, I'll try that because that's not something you usually have gluten-free. Brought it, ordered it, you know, made sure it was gluten-free, told them that I wanted it gluten-free, that I'm celiac. Brought it out, asked them, okay, just making sure that's the gluten-free one. And then she looked at me like, and she was like, let me just go check. And I didn't touch it while she went and checked, and came back out and she was like, oh, I'm so sorry, I have to take that away, that's not gluten-free. We'll make you a gluten-free one now. So, like, could you imagine how sick I would have been if I ate a full gluten hot dog with the bread and everything? So always triple check that things are gluten-free, and don't feel bad about asking multiple times, because it's your health and you're the one who's going to get sick at the end of the day if they've made a mistake. So always check that it's definitely gluten-free. So I really hope you liked my video and that you found these 5 tips helpful for dining out with celiac disease and type 1 diabetes. Please comment down below your thoughts and if you have any tips yourself, because I'd love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you do, please give it a big thumbs up, comment down below, and subscribe if you're new here. I really appreciate everyone who takes the time to watch my videos, and I hope these top tips help. And I will see you all in the next video.